Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and I am the host of Resilience Radio, where I interview leaders who are professionals at crushing the tough stuff. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Danny Hadas, and I would say that he is a customer experience expert. When I talked to him earlier, I said, hey, should I call you a customer service expert? He wasn't happy with that. Because he said, well, I think that there's a massive difference between customer service and customer experience. So I can't wait to dig into that. Danny, welcome.
Thank you. Way to welcome me. And I've got a grin from ear to ear with that intro. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
So first of all, what makes you an expert?
What makes me an expert? It's a term that gets thrown around quite often. I'd say I'm an expert because in the last 10 years, I've worked with more than 14 brands and 12 industries, helping them with the experience they deliver to their customers. They've asked me and my teams that I've worked with how to produce those experiences, and we've given them the answers. They've since taken our counsel, have implemented those ways of creating experiences, and it's working out pretty well. I would consider the questions they asked and the result, the expertise we provided, and it's helped them grow their businesses. So I hope that the last 10 years has made me knowledgeable, maybe an expert in customer experience.
Okay, so you're not like an old man. You're fairly young. Like, how did you start this? And then I do want to ask about that difference. But, you started at what? How old were you?
I was 22 when I started in consulting.
So tell us about that journey.
It was a great journey. I graduated university at the ripe age of 22, like many Americans in this country. And I was looking for a career, and I stumbled across consulting. My cousin was involved in consulting. I had some friends who were involved in consulting, and I thought I might get involved. And what was really immediately clear about consulting was the absolute opportunity for diversity and experience. And when I say diversity and experience, I mean that in consulting, in management consulting, you can work in anything from defense to Disney. That's the way I used to call it. You could literally work with the Department of Defense for the United States government, or you could work with Walt Disney World. And I can't imagine two things that are more opposite on the spectrum of industry disciplines. And so very early on, I began to develop that diverse career. So starting with pharmaceuticals, then going into utilities, then going into Walt Disney World and the world of entertainment, from there into insurance, then back out into the world of entertainment through toys and children's brands, and from there, again, the experience just continually grew into more and more industry exposure. Comcast and AT&T, DirecTV, and Auto and whatnot. So that's where the consulting career began. But experience actually began, I'd say, with my very first project. We were working with a large pharmaceutical company, and they were using a very, very old software operating system. When I say that, I mean things like Windows. And they were looking, Windows. They were looking to upgrade to, at the time, it was Windows Vista, if you can believe it. Windows Vista was the new big thing and had a terrible reputation. And our company was hired to give every single employee around the globe a brand new computer, a laptop, which no one really was using, laptops, and this brand new operating software with brand new Microsoft Office. And they didn't know how to use it. There were so many things that were different. If you remember the old file menus, those were replaced with what's now called the ribbon. That was an experience we had to provide. We had to communicate what their change journey was going to look like, what they could expect, how they would need to participate, how they would have to back up their files, where they would have to be, when, how they could schedule their quote-unquote migration. That was my first ever experience with customer experience type work. This was internal employee experience, but nonetheless experience. And then really my interest started to really increase when I worked with Walt Disney World. We were helping them with their vision of the Magic Band. And that was quite I'm going to keep on using the word experience, for lack of a better term. That was quite the experience.
What is a Magic Band?
What is a Magic Band? A Magic Band is your key to unlock all of the magic at Walt Disney World. Rather than walking around with
band.
Yes. Rather than walking around with a piece of paper or your wallet or your room key, everything you need is in this beautiful keepsake of a band that you can customize before your visit. It actually enables you to schedule rides and meals and meet and greets with cast members before you even show up to the park. That is magical on itself. And when you tap your band against a kiosk, it knows who you are, it knows why you're there, and it grants you access to whatever it is you're trying to achieve in that very moment. we help them build the infrastructure that sources the magic bands and helps them work around the parks. And that was incredibly impactful, very fun. And at that point, I thought to myself, okay, I know that I feel closest to my work, most engaged when I'm working on things that have a direct impact on consumers, customers, people. Mm-hmm. And I want to find out more about that. And then little did I know, there was an entire discipline on customer experience management, customer experience strategy, customer experience execution. I started reading everything I could about it. One of the first books I read was The Experience Economy, and very eye-opening, very eye-opening. This notion that we are moving into a world where the only differentiator that's going to provide strategic value to businesses is a business's customer experience, the experience it provides to, yeah.
Okay, so go back. You told me there's a huge difference between customer service and customer experience. What's the difference, and why do we need to know that difference? Isn't customer service part of the experience?
Customer service is part of the experience, yes, but if you think of the experience as the umbrella, service is one component. I think most often we consider service something you get when something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. You call up, for example, your cable goes out, you call up customer service. Things of that nature. You're having a problem with a product, you call up customer service. Then again, there's also the service experience. You go into a restaurant. How are you greeted? How are you escorted to your table? How many people are serving you? How often do they fill up your water? Do they ask the lady at the table if she would like to order first? Things of that nature. That's also customer service. All of that comprises the experience. So service is a piece of the experience, but it is not the experience.
Okay. So where do you think, first of all, I could extrapolate and say that the experience allows people to have a connection emotionally or otherwise with a brand. Where do companies fail on the experience journey? Like, where do they're like, yeah, okay, we think we got this, but really, truly, they have all kinds of cracks in their experience. What do you see most often? Where do those cracks exist?
The most common crack that I've observed in my experience with the business is the messaging, the outward marketing, as compared with the actual experience that customers have. So a company, a brand will say, we offer this, this, and this, and it's so amazing and so special, or our product is fantastic. And then you go through the process of purchasing that product or using that service, and what was promised to you is not what is delivered. And that's a major communication gap. They are selling promises they can't keep. And that is, I'd say that's the most common issue. I would say that's the most common issue with brands today. They can't make good on their promises. And that's a major experience gap when you're expecting something and it's not delivered. Go ahead.
Are you saying that we should under-promise because then our likelihood of success is dramatically higher? Are you saying we should, really simplify what we do and just say, hey, here's your product, see you later? What should we do to fill that gap?
Well, that's the best part about what I do. When we go into organizations and help them with their challenges, the first thing we observe are silos. Companies are so often not communicating in a matrixed, cross-functional way that actually fosters an environment to create a product or service that is congruent with the promise all the way through execution. It's actually not that difficult if you just have people working together to create an experience together. If the experience was prioritized, it would be done fairly seamlessly, but more often than not, you have these silos. Marketing has goals to create a funnel. Sales has a goal to close the funnel. And then the folks on the other end providing the experience, they're left with the rest. And then retention becomes the major conversation. But that makes for a very incongruent journey for the customer all along. Research to purchase to the experience, I'll call it the use experience. And those things aren't the same. They could be the same. There are brands out there that do it. They marry each part of the journey seamlessly, and they provide their customers with memorable, rich, and happy, delightful experiences, exceptional experiences. It does happen. There are many brands out there that do a phenomenal job of it, but they are far more disciplined and recognize the power of people than other brands that aren't successful.
Who would you say, or what company would you say delivers that level of experience that is really polished?
So I'm gonna use a big one. I'm gonna say Amazon, and here's why. And I don't know if everyone has discovered the magic of Amazon. Sure, they have Prime and 2-day shipping, which is pretty great. But more than that, Amazon is a brand you don't really interact with much on the human side. I think that most people would find that to be the case. But when you do have to interact with them on the human side, you will find no easier way of getting in touch. You can open up your app. From there, you can go contact customer service. It'll show you all of your orders on the very next screen. You can pick out which order you want to talk about. Someone will call you right then and there, connect you with someone live. They'll know everything there is to know about your product. You ordered it, when it was delivered, or when it was supposed to be delivered, and they walk you through everything. They just take care of it.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a promise of lightning fast delivery. It's a promise, and Amazon promises all of that.
Sure, but Amazon isn't Amazon, right? Like they have all kinds of resources at their disposal. When we look at even a very successful business owner, maybe they're running a 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, even, like nearly $100 million company. They don't necessarily have the kind of resources to do what Amazon does. So isn't it kind of natural that they would have to choose where they put in the funds and the resources for that type of experience?
It is, but I'll take another giant and just stand them up to Amazon. I would say that Google's service experience doesn't stand up to Amazon's. Another giant behemoth does not.
So why is it that Amazon does it better? Like, do they have better infrastructure? Do they have better leadership? Do they have better overall internal and external communication or messaging? Like, what are they doing right that others don't get?
Comes down to priorities.
Okay.
Comes down to priorities. And there are smaller businesses I'm familiar with that prioritize the human experience, the customer experience over other things, because what they realize is that when you provide meaningful, impactful, memorable experiences, that in turn will create loyalty and advocacy. And that's what builds a thriving business. You need people to come back, and you need those people who come back to bring other people in. Otherwise, your priority becomes marketing because you're so hungry to get new people to experience your products that you don't have time or money, as you said, resources to focus on the experience itself.
So let's flip this around a little bit, because what I would love to have you do is come in and examine my company and show me where I can get better. I pride myself on the experience that a coaching client has from start to finish. And, our kind of secret underlying intent is to take our clients by surprise and give them far more than they expected. And we very often, mostly often, manage to do that, but it's a little bit haphazard. We have a philosophy that we're going to wow them on a very personal level. So a wow for one client could be very different from another. So it's not systematized. So I'd love to get your opinion on that. But if we flip this around for a minute and say, what about employees? Should they also have amazing experiences? And whose responsibility is that? You've been in companies where you've had great experiences and others where perhaps it wasn't as great. What do you think about that one?
I think that's a great question. Personally, my belief is that the employer is responsible for creating amazing experiences for its people. In turn, their people will create amazing experiences for the customers. But that also is not a shared belief across all companies. I think that notion is becoming more and more popular and more known to major brands and small brands alike. But I do believe that, and for example, to help your new employees feel welcome when they join a company, that's the sole responsibility of the employer, to have experiences, processes, services in place to help folks feel welcome when they join a brand as someone who works for that brand, all the way through evaluations and feedback and compensation and community involvement and overall engagement and work assignments. It is upon the employer to create those experiences that make that employee feel that they are part of something that they want to give to. And that is where companies like, I'd say Google and Facebook and the tech companies have really been thriving. There are also, again, smaller brands. I'm familiar with auto dealerships that are doing similar things, and they create, first of all, they have leaders that are inspiring because they focus on their people. But second, they have missions that are inspiring, and they can see the results in their customers or the people that they have an impact on, and it's a revolving cycle. It's a virtuous cycle.
So you've had, again, experiences as amazing as the one with Disney and some not as amazing. If you were to think about the less amazing experiences from an employee standpoint, what created so much distress for you that you actually felt like, you couldn't stay there anymore?
A major lack of trust within the client organizations, not trusting or empowering their people to make decisions, to make things happen, always second guessing those decisions. A lot of, I think in any corporate culture, you're going to have a lot of, for lack of a better term, gossip and things of that nature. But I think that in the toughest clients, they were more concerned about the perception of having a focus on customer experience rather than having a true focus on building a premier experience for both their people and their customers. And that for me was something very challenging that I didn't feel comfortable working in.
Mm-hmm. So what you're really saying is it's super important for companies to walk the talk.
Yeah. Yes. And if you don't, it's very easily sniffed out. It's very easily sniffed out.
So if you're a McDonald's, right? You're delivering one type of product, brand, and experience. And if you're a Porsche, you're delivering another. And it's important to have internal consistency, not only outwardly to the customer, but internally to the employees as well. And if there is a gap in that, there is quickly a sense of dissatisfaction and disengagement from people who could be really superstar employees.
Absolutely. I think you said it very well. Yes.
Very interesting. Okay, so let's kind of take a bit of a right turn. What would you say is one of your greatest adversities that you've experienced in your lifetime?
Personal or professional, or either?
Let's do professional.
Okay. So I was on my third consulting engagement, and I was rising quickly within the organization, something that I was very proud of. And I was at my first year at I just recently been promoted, and I just finished my first year at this new level, and it was time for annual evaluations. I had thought that in the past year I'd really done a great job. I was working with a phenomenal client, very high exposure program, and my feeling was that my work warranted a really solid rating. And the ratings for this company were on a scale of 1 to 6, 6 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And what we were told is that anytime you start at a new level, you should expect to get, let's say, a 3, which would be, middle of the pack. But I was expecting that my ranking this year would actually be higher, maybe a 4, maybe a 5, definitely not a 6, maybe a 4 or 5. And when I sat down with my managers, they told me that while they thought the quality of my output was such that it warranted at least a 4, they were going to, and by the way, these ratings have a significant impact on your prospects for promotion, your compensation, and many other factors with respect to your advancement within this company. At least they did. They don't do this anymore, but this is how it was when I was there. And so they told me that despite the fact that my work warranted at least a 4, they felt that my attitude and disposition in the workplace was not collaborative, positive, malleable enough to warrant that rating. Yeah, and they thought that I would never change. And because of that, it wasn't worth giving me the higher rating and demonstrating their investment in me. So they were going to give me a 3, which meant that I was going to remain static in that first year.
So what did they mean by your attitude? Like, what were you doing that was so terrible? Like, what were they looking for, and what weren't you doing, or vice versa?
At the time, of course, it couldn't even see beyond. I couldn't see. I thought everything I did was so fantastic, but that was exactly it. A lack of humility, overconfidence, an inability to diplomatically, tactfully collaborate with others such that I could take the best components from my teammates' ideas, integrate them into what we were doing, and foster an environment where we all felt like we were contributing. Instead, I was quite combative. I always felt like my way was the only way. And I would kind of bulldoze people into submission. I'd say, all right, this is the best way. This is how we're going to get it done. And whether I was right or wrong, it did not make people want to work with me. And that was the feedback that people had provided to my managers. And that was what my managers had observed firsthand. Of course, I wasn't willing to admit it or see this at the time. But looking back on it, especially since now that I'm much more self-aware, I can still see those things pop out every now and again. That's what was going on. And at the time, I was devastated. But so
did you think of yourself as the smartest person in the room? Did you think, hey, like these people don't really know what they're doing, and yeah, I need to. I'm obliged. It's my responsibility to take this by the reins and make it happen?
I wouldn't go that far because I have to say the people I was working with were brilliant, and they were definitely smarter than me. That was what was so frustrating about it for me at the time. I didn't understand how they couldn't see how simple this path was that I was trying to lay out for them. And that was the frustrating piece. It seemed to me that they were just interested in their own agenda or going along a path that wasn't as productive. I didn't know. I didn't understand what disagreements were about. I couldn't see the other side of it. But I did feel that my way was the best way, regardless of who was smarter. It was just more of, how do you not see that this is the only way? Given how bright you are, how do you not see this? Why do you want to pursue this other path? Can't you see how detrimental to our plans that will be? It's things like that.
So they came back and the feedback was, okay, you're really smart, you're really good, but you're a little full of yourself.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, so what did you do with that? How did you even respond? How do you go back to work the next day?
Well, I've always enjoyed a good challenge, and the trigger phrase they use is, "We don't think you will change. We think that you will be out of here in the next year. We don't think you're going to change. We don't think you'll be able to turn this corner." And I don't like it when people tell me I can't do something. I really don't like it when people tell me I can't do something. So I sulked, of course. First I sulked for a little bit because that's the way I was at the time. And then I said, all right, well, they say I can't. Well, I need to prove to myself and then as a result of them that I can. So I thought about it, and I don't remember how I came across it, but I decided to buy the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
And yes, and the beginning of that book says to use it like a textbook, read each chapter twice before going forward. And that's exactly what I did. I went through each chapter twice, and I took tons of notes, and I would reflect, and I would see, oh, wow, this reminds me of what I didn't do in this situation. This reminds me of this other thing that I didn't do that I could do. And I started practicing. I started using work as a lab, a live lab for experimenting using these methods. And all of a sudden, things were turning around. And I kid you not, within 6 months, we have, annual and semi-annual. We usually get feedback every 30 days. But when it came to my 6-month review, what was said to me is that I seemed like a totally different person. And rather than gloat about that, because that's not what you do according to the book, I just thought to myself, well, you know what? I'd better keep on going. I better keep using this book. And
so were you gloating internally?
I was happy internally.
Okay.
But here's the thing. You can't gloat because they were right.
Right.
They were right about me being in a bad way. So it was because of that feedback I was able to change. So really, they say feedback's a gift. And even though one really hit me hard in the mouth, there was no point in gloating because at the end of the day, they were right. So they actually saved me from myself. Right. And things have been much better ever since.
So I want to pause here because I think this is really important. I work with a very, very highly driven population. And the very, very highly driven population is also the very highly frustrated population because other people don't get it. And they don't understand why they don't see things the way they do. It sounds exactly what you just described. And so what they do is they do bulldoze over people. They need to have their way because their way is the right way. They have a vision. They need everybody to simply go along with that vision, no matter what the cost is, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it sounds like it's a very familiar feel to you. Sounds familiar. And so how we help people shift is really through the process of self-reflection. And that's exactly what you did. Like, start paying attention to what you're doing and what your outcome is. Start paying attention to what you want and look at how you're going about it. And very often the how contradicts ultimately what you want. And, I think it's quite remarkable well, two things are remarkable in my opinion, that you took it upon yourself. I mean, did you hire a coach, or was this strictly, I read the book, I studied the book, I practiced the book, and I kept going back to the book? What did you do?
It's the latter. It was a very self-directed effort.
Yes. And so that's very rare. The other thing that kind of surprises me is the leadership in that company that says, I don't think you can change. And wow, like they need some help too, right? They needed to get some training in how to coach someone to get to where they wanted them to go. So that seems to contradict, really basic leadership principles. Very interesting that you didn't get put off by that, but rather rose to the challenge.
Well, I did get put off by that for sure. I don't think for a second I wasn't looking for other work, but at the same time I thought, well, no matter where I go, it's gonna be a problem.
Right.
This isn't just two people telling me. This has got to be something that I take seriously.
So what did you change? Like, give us some very specific strategies or tactics that allow you now to work more effectively with people.
Honestly, I think a lot of people say this, so it doesn't make me unique, but framing. The way you say things to people, it really makes a big difference. When you want something, you can say, hey, we need to do this. It's really important. This is the way we do it. Or if you feel confident about the approach you have, you could just open it up to collaboration, integration. Hey, I had this thought. I thought we could go about it in this way, but I was wondering what you think. How would you take this approach, and then what would you do with it to take it forward? And all of a sudden, someone feels that they can add to it.
So it becomes theirs.
It becomes theirs. And the thing is, everyone likes to march to the beat of their own drum, even when they're marching to a larger rhythm. They want to be able to create. They want to be able to contribute. They want to say, I had a role in that. And when you take that away from people, you kind of strip them of their pride. And unfortunately, as humans, we are egotistical beings. Our ego is something that it needs to be cared for. And as soon as you rail against someone's ego, you're asking for trouble. And so I can't. And listen, one thing I learned through this process is I am far from perfect, and I do not always practice what I preach. And more often than I'd like, I succumb to my old tendencies. But I'm constantly aware, and I constantly try to steer in the direction of what I'm trying to become and what I'm trying to be every day. But when you are able to open yourself up to true collaboration, when you're able to open yourself up to genuine curiosity of how someone can engage with your idea, well, that's when really good things happen, because they feel invited.
That's a really great a piece of advice for a leader. What would you advise someone who doesn't feel like they're invited to collaborate, where they may have an opinion, but nobody's asking for it? How would you guide a person in that boat?
Carefully, because had it been me back in the day, I would have just blurted something out. And because my tendency was to be the first person to blurt something out, very often people said, yeah, no, it might be a good idea, but we've heard from this guy before, so no thanks. But this is a piece of advice that I've gleaned from listening to other folks give advice on this very topic, and it's something I'm trying to integrate myself. I didn't come up with this, so I can't take responsibility for it, but I would pay it forward by sharing this, which is, see if you could be the last person to speak. See if you can be the last person in the room to give your thought, because when that's the case, you have the ability to take into consideration everyone else's suggestions, everyone else's ideas, and show that not only did you listen, but you've synthesized that information, come up with this other suggestion. And when you do that, when you genuinely do it, then rather than the entire, you know that time when you're in a circle and everyone's talking and you just want to contribute, you want to say your thing, you're so focused on sharing your idea that you forget to pay attention to what everyone else is saying. And you might have missed the fact that there are things you can grab onto to add to your idea, refine your idea, or refine someone else's idea. We're so focused most of the time on getting out that one thing we wanted to say that we don't take advantage of the fact that we have all these tools, which is what everyone else has shared, to refine whatever it is we wanted to put out there. Mm-hmm. But if you can develop the patience to be the last person to speak, then when you finally do get that opportunity, you can synthesize it and show and demonstrate that you have taken into consideration what everyone else has said, and on top of that, here's what you've added. And I think that if people can just think about that first, I think that's a great way. It's a great start. It's a great start.
So what adventure are you on now? Like what's the journey ahead of you? What are you working on?
So I've decided to I've developed an idea of mine over I'd call it the culmination of my 10 years in consulting. And I think that it is potentially a life-changing idea for people. And I'm going to spend the next several months developing it and preparing to hopefully I'm going to write a book about it. And my plan is that in the next 2 years, this business will be blossoming, launched, making people do things that they didn't feel they could do before. And in the meantime, I'm under no illusions. I'll probably need to find other employment at some point. But at the moment, I am semi-retired, focusing on my own personal project that I will turn into a business. And then the coolest part about that is this notion of freedom. I've created an experience of freedom for myself. And whether I succeed or fail by society's conventions, it'll be by my own volition. And that is something that everyone in this country has the freedom to do. And that's something I want to take advantage of before responsibility got in the way.
Okay. So I'm very interested. You've piqued my interest. Maybe at some point we could talk, and it sounds like maybe you could use a little coaching to help you get there a lot faster, but that's just me.
Just maybe. Just maybe. You might be right.
Just maybe. And with someone who's so good in the area of customer service, who knows? Maybe some interesting magic can happen right here without even the need for a Disney band. As we're rounding the corner of this interview, you've got a coach on the line. Is there a question that you have for this particular coach?
There is. As someone who aspires to create their own business, what would you say are the 1 to 3 things that must be considered to explore this journey ahead?
Well, the word considered is an interesting question, but I'll give you 3 things. How about this? 3 things that absolute top performers, super successful people do. How about that?
Great.
Number 1 is, as you're starting a business, you start it with a whole set of beliefs. Whether you're conscious of those beliefs or not, it doesn't matter. But you start with a set of beliefs, and those beliefs sometimes propel you forward and oftentimes do not. And so the first thing I encourage you to do is literally sit down with a journal and write down all the beliefs you have about running a company. It could be, I need X amount of dollars in order to make this work. That is a belief. It could be, I need the help of these 12 people. That is a belief. It could be, I can't do this until, whatever the until is. It could be whatever. Write down all your lists of beliefs, look at them one by one, and then challenge them. Ask yourself, is that really true? Do I really need that amount of money? Do I really need these people on board? Or it could be, I need these people on board and I don't have them. I can't access them. I can't afford them. You want to ask yourself, is that really true? How can I access them without even paying them? Right? So you want to challenge your beliefs. So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is that super, super successful people have a very different way of perceiving resources. What they say is, what resources would I like to have at my disposal? Nothing is inaccessible to me. Absolutely nothing. There is no shortage of people. There is no shortage of money. There is no shortage of anything that I want. And so all I have to do is really think about the resource I want and then come up with a creative way of getting it, but not think of it as something that I can't have. Instead of that, just identify the resource I'm looking for and open yourself up to unlimited possibilities of how to access those resources. So number 3 is that super successful people are laser focused and they focus on what they really, really want. They don't get distracted. And if they do, they come back on track very quickly. So they're on a very specific, solid, almost on a lane, almost with blinders on. And so I encourage you, literally every morning if you want, wake up and say, what do I want? Is that consistent with my goal? Is that consistent with my vision? Am I moving the needle if I involve myself in these activities? Are they aligned with my vision, my goal, and my desires? Because so often we're engaged in so many things that have nothing to do with our desires, our goals, and our vision. And so those are the 3 things. Number 1, challenge your beliefs. Number 2 is understand and really think through the resources you want and think of them in an unlimited fashion. And number 3, stay on your path. And every time you lose track, come back to your path and keep asking yourself if the activities, the actions you are taking are lined up with your goals. So that's what I got for you today.
Those are pretty good. Thanks for that. Those are pretty good, especially right off the cuff.
Right off the cuff, yes.
Right off the cuff.
And guys, by the way, for whoever's listening, you guys may think that I get these questions in advance. I do not. They just throw them at me, and here's what happens. But Danny, thank you so much for spending this time with me, for talking to us about the customer experience, for differentiating between the customer experience and customer service. And really interestingly for us, I think a lot of us want to hire top performers, want to keep them engaged, want to keep them loyal. And what you've shared with us a little bit of the other side of the equation that says, hey, if you want to keep people on board, you got to make them contribute, and you have to help them feel like they are giving value to the organization. You can't do that if you're shutting them down or shutting them out. So that was really, really great. Thank you so much for your contribution to my show.
Thanks for having me. It was a wonderful opportunity. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.